essentially my A-levels teacher, Mr. Farrow, was like, don't apply for art school because you're not going to get in because, you haven't really done anything we've told you to. The thing I also love about line-based work is that you can't hide in it.
Yeah.
If I'm overthinking when I move this line through space, it's not going to feel right. Are you correcting all these other lines in here?
Yeah.
Why are you correcting those lines? And it's because they come with baggage, and that's something that we've inherently given words and lines. We've given them baggage.
Right.
I walk past Lincoln Center, I'm like, I've had my work there. I walk past Rockefeller Center, I have my work there. I walk through Times Square and I'm like, my work's been on all these screens and this floor. The city is my canvas. All these places I've had installations, I've had my work, I've performed live.
Never Work a Day talks to folks that are pivoting their lives to follow their passions. We talk about pitfalls, misadventures, hilarious and heartbreaking, meet the outstanding individuals, and learn about their continuing journey. I'm your host, Nikki Frankel, purveyor of platforms and creator of play spaces, and I'm so excited to bring you the stories of these extraordinary individuals.
Welcome back to another episode of Never Work a Day. I'm your host, Robert Morris. I'm an architect, designer, and the founder of Sunbunker, a design build studio based in Brooklyn. I'm excited to talk to Shantell Martin. Shantell's an artist and intuitive philosopher working at the intersection of drawing, identity, and space. Her line isn't just a style, it's a system, a way to think, map, and question real time. From immersive installations to global collaborations, her work turns surfaces into experiences. She pushes drawing far beyond the page. Today, we get into the process, perspective, and how a line becomes something much bigger. So, Shantell, can you tell us a bit of your early life in London and how drawing became such a constant part of your world?
So, Rob, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's funny, on the train here, I was thinking I haven't spoken about myself and my work for a while because I've been in conversation with other artists.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a nice kind of foundation or reset just to kind of talk about myself and where I'm at as an artist. But to answer your question, earlier days.
Yeah.
I'm from Southeast London.
Yeah.
I grew up in a lovely place called Thamesmead. Probably not a lot of people have heard of it or been there, but it's in, we're speaking about architecture. It's in movies like Clockwork Orange and TV
brilliant.
shows like
Yes,
Misfits.
it's got like brutalist kind of architecture.
Very brutalist, built in the late 1960s. Yeah. But unlike kind of brutalist architecture like the Barbican, this was in a working class kind of neighborhood and environment, so it's getting knocked down. And actually most of that estate that I grew up on has been knocked down.
Okay.
And also because it's right near the River Thames, and that's a whole other story or podcast about social systems and housing estates and all of that. But I grew up there and it gave me a unique experience, being mixed race with an afro, growing up in the 80s in one of the most white, racist, working class estates in the country. It gave me a unique perspective to be myself and be different because I was.
So you leaned into it.
You either lean into it or you assimilate.
Yeah, of course.
There's kind of only,
which is brilliant.
There's only a couple ways of surviving,
exactly,
So that for me gave me that outlet to, just like all of us, we all drew as kids.
Yeah.
I think we're given this gift.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was a big doodler as well in school. That was one of my ways of communicating. Sketching. And,
like even before that, we're picking up pens, pencils, we're drawing. Yeah. And I think it's just naturally a way that we calibrate ourselves to the world. It's a way that we explore what's inside to the outside.
Right.
And I'm a big advocate as if you did that as a child, which we all did, you should continue to do that as an adult to reap those benefits.
Yeah, of course.
So I was a little bit of a outsider, weirdo kid that loved drawing.
Yeah.
Also just loved doing what I wanted to do. I never followed the herd.
Yeah, of course.
I never really adhered to peer pressure.
Right.
I just did what I wanted.
And you did what you liked probably too. And you probably embraced the things you liked a little bit more than this. And you're probably a little bit resistant to the things you...
Exactly. And being a little bit of a tomboy is like, you know what? I don't like trying to impress the boys. I hang out with them. They're all idiots. You know, like,
of course,
like I'm going to go play Mega Drive and Nintendo with them and like with our wrestling figures, but I'm not going to go and do all the things that my friends who were girls were doing, which, a lot of it was pertained around that. But, that said, I grew up in Southeast London, continued to draw and use that as an outlet to explore myself and the world around me. I didn't know it was art at the time. I knew it was an outlet.
Did you have canvases as a child or like a teenage?
My canvases were the back of my school books, the underneath of my bed, behind curtains, because I would get in trouble for drawing a lot because I was that kid that was always distracted and drawing and not paying attention. But little did they know is that when you're drawing, it actually helps anchor your attention.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
In science, when I'm drawing in the back of my school book, I'm actually using that drawing as an anchor to remember what was going on.
Right.
But teachers at that time didn't understand that. So you would get punished or, kind of labeled as a little bit of a disruptor.
Right. And then you moved on to St. Martin's. Was that a seminal moment? Was that a big kind of turning point in your life?
Yes and no. So before I went to St. Martin's, I actually went to Camberwell College of Arts.
Okay.
So in England, you at 16, you finish your GCSEs.
And you did a portfolio thing?
Then I did my 2 years in A-level.
Okay.
And I had no interest in doing art. When I was 16, you finish school and I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And someone just called me and said, Shantell, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, come do A-levels. I was like, okay. Right. And you had to do a minimum of 3 A-levels. So I did biology, physics, and design technology because I liked my design technology teacher. And physics and biology, I thought, maybe I can do sports science. And because I was the fastest girl in my school, I was good at running. And I was like, maybe I can go into sports because I'm good at that. And so I did my 3 A-levels. And after a week of physics, I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah, of course,
This makes no sense to me. And so I dropped physics, but I had to have another A-level. Yeah. And I didn't do GCSE art. Right. But I figured, okay, art's probably my best bet at doing something that is tangible and I'm okay with. So I tracked down Miss Player, the art teacher at the time, and she remembered me from kind of earlier years and was like, okay, we'll let you in. Yeah. And then that was interesting because A-level art...
Probably a bit of art history, but then also some...
Exactly, like art history, but then they're also teaching you like, let's draw still life, let's learn how to mix colors, let's learn how to do these skills. And I've always naturally rebelled against systems where they're trying to tell you how to do something. So I wasn't a good art A-level student because I don't want to use brown. They're like, well, make your own brown and use brown. I don't want to use brown. I want to use these colors right out of the tin. They look great, or like do a still life. I'm drawing a still life. I got distracted. It turned into something else. My mind would wander. And it's funny, when I think back the work I did at A-level, I still have this work today, but I did a whole series of dust books. Right. I just went out into the world and collected dust from interiors and exteriors. And I went around with tape and collected dust from like under the couch or like behind the fridge. Right. Or like under a bush. Yeah. And so I have, volumes of dust books, and I did a lot of black and white, weird copy and pasting, cutting out newspapers. So I went the other way and just really explored these kind of niche things I was interested in.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And so that was a lot of my A-level. And then essentially my A-levels teacher, Mr. Farrow, was like, don't apply for art school because you're not going to get in because, you haven't really done anything we've told you to.
Yeah, of course.
And so if you're from a world where no one's telling you what to do, you do what they tell you can't do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's like, okay, well, if I can't do A-levels, if I can't apply for art school, let me just apply just so I can prove this guy wrong.
Yeah, of course.
So I applied to Camberwell College of Arts and then I got in. Yeah. And, at the time it's still there. It's in Peckham. Right. And that was incredible. So in 1999, I went to Camberwell College of Arts and did my 1-year foundation course. And a foundation course is really amazing. You get to try all these different electives. You do sculpture and typography and design and all these sorts of things. And for me, that was a pivotal moment going to Camberwell College of Arts. Right. Because for the first time, I was surrounded by all these individuals that were outsiders and weirdos like myself. They were very unique. They looked different. They acted different. They listened to different things. They didn't fit into the normal mold. And we all were in this one place called art school. And so that was really amazing for me. And yeah, long story short, I got a distinction there. And then everyone was talking about this place called St. Martin's, like my granddad went there or my dad went there, and it was in the Pulp song,
Right, yeah, of course.
And so I was like, okay, well, let me apply there because everyone's talking about it. So I applied and I got in. And it's interesting when I think back, because there was never a moment where I was like, I want to do art or I want to be an artist. That was never presented to me as an option. Yeah. It's always been like, well, you can't do this, so I'm going to do that. Okay, well, this is a thing here. Okay, so I'm going to do that. It's been very grassroots, like
you
one
kind of find a way,
even
though you want to do a certain thing, you almost find a way of doing it, because
it's not even knowing you want to do a certain thing. It's knowing that you just want to, you say yes to things you want to do and say no to the things you don't want to do. And like having that as a compass, but not even knowing where it's going to lead you.
Right.
And so that led me to St. Martin's, and I did very well there. I got a first-class honours, one of the top in my year, got to explore lots of different types of work and experiences. And then you're kind of spat out at the end of that after a 3-year BA honours, and, you do what you're told and you graduate with those honours or whatever. And then you realise there's no role for you in the art world in England because... And maybe you can tell me if this is different, or someone can tell me if it's different now. But the people who came out of school that got jobs that were people who had connections, someone's uncle worked somewhere, someone's father worked somewhere, someone's dad's brother worked somewhere. And if you came out with no one invested in you, it was very hard to then be a part of the system of design or art in the UK. Yeah. And so I learned then that, this world is not reserved for me. Yeah. It's not for me. And therefore, I'm not going to participate in it. And so then that's why I ended up moving to Japan, because it was the furthest place I could imagine at the time. And I'd been there. I went there, I think, in 2000 for the first time. I went to Japan to visit some friends from art school. And I loved it there because you could walk through the street and be very anonymous. And then if you met someone, they would just ask you where they're from or where you're from. And I would just say, I'm from London. And they would say, Ina, that's cool. Yeah. And that was it. Yeah. When I was growing up in London, you walk around, someone would be like, where are you from? And then you speak. And then now they've judged you based on your class, your background. And then they'd be like, no, where are you really from? Right. And you're like, my granddad fought in the war for this country. I'm from here, and it's like, there's so much judgment at the time growing up into England and having to justify where you're from, even though you're from that place. Yeah. And so, after graduating and moving to Japan, like that just gave me a sense of like, now I can figure out where I'm really from, like, and who I am as a person without all these layers of judgment or culture that are wrapped up in my DNA because I was born in a certain country. Right. Were you working in different mediums when you were in Tokyo, Japan? Were you working in music or? Mm-hmm. So basically the work I was doing at Campbell College of Arts and St. Martin's, when I look back, a lot of it was very dark performance-based work. And then also a lot of clip-ins, printmaking, very like threads of what I do now, but very different. I was obsessed with Memento Mori and took a Memento Mori class at St. Martin's, and I made giant sculptures of hangman and nooses and made, cut out dates of newspaper and then would print the whole rest of the newspaper and just leave the dates. I was doing all sorts of different work. I would do performances where I would bring everyone to an alleyway and just swing milk around. Right. And watch the milk dissipate, and everyone would be a part of that experience. I did performances where I would create little puppet characters and like little songs about where they're going to go to hell and stuff like this. And it seems quite intense now, but I think when you're at that age, you're kind of a late teenager, early 20s, you're contemplating your existence in this world and what that means and, what life and death means and all of these things. And you have art as your tool to explore and try and understand those questions. And then going to Japan, it changed in a sense that I was limited in my access to all sorts of different mediums. Art school, you get to try printmaking, and there's, you can get glue guns and large pieces of materials, and you have more space. But in Japan, when I moved there, I was living in a tiny 1DK space, which is like just basically a little room where you roll out your futon, and then that's your living room, that's your dining room. It's all in one room. And so I started to draw at a very small scale then. I did tons of drawing. It's probably my favorite work when I look back. But I did these almost like diaristic long accordion drawings, which are about 9 feet long. And they're a mixture of thoughts, ideas, observations, kind of contemplations, imaginations. And I'm using a 0.05 pen, like a very, very, very fine pen.
Yeah.
And, I did so many of these drawings. And actually, last year, I got to display one of them at the Rockefeller Center in their kind of downstairs terminal area. They have this massive, many, 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 many feet hallway. And I got to blow up one of these books and these drawings I did 20 years ago and display it there.
Was it digital or physical, like blow up?
It was physical.
Okay,
yeah.
Brilliant.
And that was nice because, seeing something I drew 20 years ago now at a life-size scale, and you're able to like walk past that and read it and engage with it and see it.
Right. Is that something that you had to do on site in the space, or bring it there large scale?
It was reproduced. So we've reproduced it and then installed it there.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
The medium in Japan was a lot of, it went from that drawing and then into performance VJing. So I became a visual jockey, which, you have your DJ, your disc jockey, and then you have your VJ, the visual jockey doing the visuals. So I would draw and create live drawn, digital or analog visuals to DJs, dancers, musicians, and almost in 2 different realms. So I'll either be drawing in a Japanese mega club with my computer and my laptop and a drawing tablet, and I'll be drawing to thousands of people dancing, and I'll be like, woo, and the crowd will go, woo, and, I'm drawing to the beat, and I'm zooming in and I'm zooming out. Or the next day I might be in a Japanese avant-garde club where there's Bluto dancers and circuit benders and people that play music with static, and I'm drawing under, an overhead presenter, like a projector, and putting my hands on there with magnifying glasses, and it's more tactile and tangible. And so that was a medium like I really loved. In both cases, you're creating live.
Yeah.
You're in the flow. You're in the moment. You're being spontaneous. You don't have time to be anyone else but yourself. You get to put yourself in a position where you're just drawing to the music and being in the moment and going on this journey. And that's basically, I think, the real basis of the foundation of my work as a whole. Putting yourself in those positions where you get to kind of react and extract and be attentive and give the space your attention.
Right. Okay. So it seemed like when you were there, you got the opportunity to do a lot more things than you may not have done in London, but the connections were they immediate, or you had to build up those connections while there? Did you have like a following there or contacts there that you could lean on? Because I can imagine it being a big kind of cultural shift to like.
If anyone spent time in Japan, you know that nothing is immediate.
Yeah.
As a culture, there's an untrustworthiness against the outsider, the gaijin. And so a lot of that time is actually you spending time and investing time and building relationships. And that's done also very grassroots, one foot in front of another, building friendships, relationships, and kind of exploring that over the time. And I was there for 5 years. So, that was a result of like 5 years of investing in my time there. I was also a lot younger, so I'm going out a lot more and meeting a lot more people. But it was interesting because I've always been very open about my work and sharing and exposing the process behind what I do. And so I would do these visuals in Japan and people would be like, how are you doing that? And I would be like, I'm using this, this, and this. And I would showcase and expose everything I'm doing. And then I would go visit London and I'd ask people like, oh, what are you working on? And like, oh, I can't tell you.
Right.
And so there was such a contrast in being in Japan and collaborating with people like, oh, you make music? Oh, I do visuals. Let's collaborate. I love that I started my career there because there was such an open sense of collaboration.
Right.
And that was such a stark contrast to the competitiveness and the secretness
of
and
London,
the close doorsness of London.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I went to Japan because I was able to collaborate and I was able to be open. And I think that really adhered to that part of me.
Yeah. I remember that in grad school in London when I was there. Everyone would share at the start. You would go on these field trips to like different countries and you'd collect all this information, then you'd bring it back. And then towards the end, it would get very competitive. People wouldn't, share as much.
I think it's dumb. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It's such a strange way of occupying space and behaving, and like you call these people your friends or your colleagues, but then you're like, I can't tell you what I'm working on.
Right.
And it's like, why not? Like you're working on some secret MI5 mission. Like, what are you doing really? And it doesn't make you seem any more important or any more kind of creative. Right. It's such an odd mindset. So I've always been of the mindset of collaboration over competition and open exposure, shareness, all of that stuff.
Right. So your work often wraps around space, almost like architecture. Do you think of your line as kind of building the environment? Is that something that you kind of think about? Or
the line is a foundation for everything.
Yeah.
We look at these different industries, fashion, architecture, design, everything starts with a line. And so I'm using a line as a foundation to take any form, space, industry, medium. My lines do occupy spaces and create form. They also can adhere to different forms, but they can also create the forms themselves. So I love the versatility of a line. And, my line in space is one that can be structural or it could also be decorative. It kind of lends itself to those different realms.
Yeah. Your work is a lot of, is it improv? Is it, and it's immediate, but also how much do you think about it before you actually, put it on paper?
It's like starting this conversation. You wanted me to think about a bunch of things or like, kind of express where you wanted to go with it. And I'm like, no,
no,
not no, but let's just talk, or let's just see where it goes. And it's the same with the work, but to be spontaneous, to allow yourself to improvise, you do need a foundation. And in a way, especially when you draw, as you can relate, drawing is rule-based. Drawing is sometimes and often an algorithm of systems. And so for me to be able to walk into a room or a wall that is 200 foot long and be like, okay, I'm going to just start drawing.
Yeah.
I'm being spontaneous. I'm being intuitive. But below that is a layer and a system of an algorithm. There's a subset of recurring words and spaces and landscapes and forms. And I know, okay, when I'm approaching a 100-foot wall drawing, I'm going to walk up and down that wall just to energetically feel the space, to be aware of the room or the wall. And then I'm just going to approach it like movement, you know? So it's funny because I can create a massive mural that's a couple 100 feet wall and do it in a weekend. People are like, wow, how did you do this?
Yeah.
And we're not too far from Union Square. So if you walk into the W Hotel Union Square, I did 2 big drawings there in the lobby, and I did that in a weekend. But essentially, imagine if you're just moving your arm in space over a surface and you leave a line behind. Of course, you can cover that surface area in a couple of days. Yeah. But within that is, okay, I want to have a line that feels sharp and confident, that is super crisp. And that comes from practice. Because the thing I also love about line-based work is that you can't hide in it.
Yeah.
If I create a line and I'm not confident in that line, if I hesitate in that line, you can see it.
Yeah, it shows.
If I create a line and I'm trying to draw like someone else, you can feel it. If I'm overthinking when I move this line through space, it's not going to feel right. And so that's why I can walk into a space, create a drawing, and it looks good, it feels good, the composition feels good, and there's no planning ahead of it. But the planning is that I have this foundation of, okay, I'm going to move in space. I'm going to allow the pen to go where it wants to go. I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to allow it. Okay, now I have this structure of an initial line that covers most of the area. And with this initial line, I can see these structural elements, these negative pockets of space. And those are now clues to what goes in them.
Right.
So now there's a language that is unfolding.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a triangle. Okay, I put a bird's beak there. If I have a bird's beak, I have a bird's eye. If I have a bird's eye, I need a wing. If there's a line that is almost soft and long, it feels like a landscape, I'm going to put a landscape in there. Is it an ocean or is it mountains? Let's see what other clues I have. And so it's about creating that initial line, that initial framework, and then the negative spaces, the pockets, speak to you because there's an algorithm, there's a system, there's a language of how you fulfill it and complete it.
Brilliant. The tools that you use certain markers for bigger jobs, bigger work. You use kind of bigger brushes, bigger. It's all scale based, right?
It's scale based. The bigger pen you can make, the bigger line you can have. Obviously, it's funny. My friend Marcio likened my work to kind of different eras of line weight.
Yeah.
And I had that era in Japan where I'm using a 0.05 pen. I'm using a very fine pen. And then I moved to New York and I start to pick up a Staedtler Lumnicolor M-size pen. And so the work is getting a little thicker. And you'll see that work, in the piece I drew over all my bedroom walls and that ended up in the New York Times, etc. But I'm using that Staedtler pen there. And then from there, then I pick up like a Krink K71 pen, which is kind of like an inch wide, and then I'm using that. And then from there, I'm, kind of then exploring different sorts of paints or ways to get even bigger in the line and then creating these large floor pieces at the New York City Ballet or Governor's Island or these other spaces. And so, when I look back, there's definitely this line thickness evolution where it's, as I'm growing in my career and confidence, so is the scale and the thickness of the line and the work.
So you've worked with a lot of brands. Is there any kind of resistance or is there any kind of, how do you maintain your voice while adapting to a framework?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the way you ask that question is like you work with a lot of brands. How do you keep your voice? But how do you keep your voice when you also work with institutions and museums and galleries? And we often, I think the undertone there is like a brand, when you ask that is like, well, why are you specifying a brand versus any other kind of medium or canvas? And, and I think when you work authentically with yourself, regardless of the entity, the industry, the medium, when you work authentically as yourself, then you can keep your voice within that. If I'm working with a ballet or a museum or with Tiffany Co, it's up to me from an early stage to be like, this is who I am. This is what I do. Yeah. I've definitely had situations where people from commercial standpoint or from an institutional standpoint, however you want to differ those. I believe the only way that you differ them is one, you get actually paid and one you really don't.
Right, yeah.
But if we put those all in a bigger bucket, I've been in situations where I'm going to do a mural or an installation and they say, Shantell, we need to approve this beforehand.
Yeah, of course.
Can you send us a drawing?
Right.
And I say, no.
Right.
And they say, why not? And I say, because I don't know what I'm going to draw until I get there.
Right.
Then you just end up in those situations. It's just a system where people are just used to approving things.
Right.
They don't actually need to approve it. Like they've already approved you. They're already hiring you or commissioning you or collaborating with you.
Based on what you've done, But
we just have these like systems where it's just someone's used to ticking it off or having their boss tick it off, and then they like, okay, we got the green light.
Right.
With my work, I'm like, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a piece. And I don't know what that piece is, but the piece will know what it is when it lives here.
Of course.
And these are some other pieces I've done before, and here you go.
Yeah.
But I think when an institution, a brand, an individual want to work with you, collaborate with you, commission you, it's up to you to say yes or no when it's a good fit or not. I've had a lot of times where someone's come to me and said, we want you to do this. And I said, well, actually, that's not a good fit for me, but I know an artist who loves to work that way. Yeah. Let me introduce you.
So you steer them in the right way sometimes. Yeah, brilliant. And do these kind of projects, do they challenge your process? And if so, how do you navigate that tension if there is one?
What do you mean by challenge the process?
Like if say, for example, a brand or somebody you're working with, they ask for kind of a template or an idea of what you're going to be doing, do they give you enough information that you can kind of work on your own without having something approved beforehand?
Like that? Yeah, usually, if it's a product or if it's a wall, you usually know like where the space is. And then for me, my process is like, let me think about where this is going to live in space, who's going to see it, what are some keywords that might spark some kind of inspiration. And that's it. Like there's some initial contemplation and thinking.
Right.
And that's where the kind of like the intuitive philosopher comes in, the sense of like contemplating, asking questions, observing things. And then the result of that contemplation and questioning and thinking might be a product, it might be a drawing, it might be a board game, it might be something else,
Yeah, and text is also central to your work, language. Mm-hmm. I've seen you do like some videos where you kind of try to pronunciate a word, you spell it out how you think it is, then you look it up in a dictionary, and then you cross it out, and then you've got... Mm-hmm. The correct.
I'm very dyslexic, and I, even when I talk, I try not to use words I don't know how to spell. So, I'm articulate to a point.
Yeah, of course.
But I think there's also that carries across from my work. I'm not trying to use anything or explore anything or do anything I'm not able to.
I definitely empathize with that, because I've had those kind of learning difficulty moments in my early adult life, so I can identify with that left side, right side.
But I think, words and phrases and letters are a very important part of my work. And I think as someone that draws and also realize that words are drawings, words are made up of lines, but now we've given them their own kind of class and put them on a pedestal. And, now this word is correct or incorrect, or you spelt this correct or incorrect.
Yeah.
And as an artist, I often say, well, are you going to correct my lines, my drawings?
Yeah.
So why correct my words if you're not going to also correct my drawings, and vice versa? I've definitely had moments at shows, at large installations where people have chased me down and they're terrified. They're like, oh my God, Shantell, you spelt this wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, right now we're in a massive installation of mine with 2,000 people. Yeah. There's lines that cover this whole entire space. Yeah. Are you correcting all these other lines in here? Yeah. Why are you correcting those lines? And it's because they come with baggage, and that's something that we've inherently given words and lines. We've given them baggage.
Right.
And so for me, being dyslexic, it is a superpower. It allows us to draw with words and make that our own and make it our work and challenge people and use that and play with it and have fun with it. And if it is spelt incorrectly, maybe that's done on purpose, or maybe it isn't. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because they're all my lines and my work.
Yeah.
And, working with different brands and institutions and entities, I get to challenge myself in the sense that I get to explore different sorts of canvases, spaces. I get to expose my work to different demographics. I get to make things that I wouldn't be able to make by myself. I get to explore different mediums and techniques. I get to work at different scales. I get to collaborate with different people who are obsessed with what they do and bring that together. And so, there's such a sense of like, I I'm back here in New York and I walk around this city and I love being here because I walk past Lincoln Center. I'm like, I've had my work there. You know, I walk past Rockefeller Center. I have my work there. I walk through Times Square and I'm like, my work's been on all these screens and this floor, you know, Governor's Island, you know, there's Whitney Museum store, like MoMA. Like I walk around this city and I'm like, oh, this city is my canvas. Like all these places I've had installations, I've had my work, I've performed live. And so I also love like how, you know, there's the memory of the work that kind of lives on within these spaces as well.
Brilliant. Expanding the line, exploring further directions in new media. Where do you see your work going next? More spatial, immersive, or digital? Is there kind of a path you're going to take, or is it going to be you're going to kind of keep doing what you're doing, but or do you take breaks in between?
Well, I just took like a 1.5 break off. You know, I spoke to other artists. I have my podcast, you know, What's the Point, where I talk to artists about what's the point of making art. You know, we make it, we die. And then what was the point? So I've been enjoying using the conversation as a medium. And also I think these things are full cycle. You know, I'm going full cycle back to almost the performance and the spaces that I was working on and in Japan. So where I'm going now, my goal for myself now in this moment is to put myself in flow in as many ways and opportunities as possible. I am going to play more music. I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to draw with my voice and with music. I'm going to collaborate and work spontaneously with other musicians. I'm going to use words from the audience, and I'm going to create these live environments and soundscapes and moments for people to come and enjoy. So that's my own personal goal, is to use this time here in New York to perform, to create live moments. And, you know, outside of that, also we're near Union Square. I'm going to do, I don't know if you saw the massive 200-foot long walking meditation path that I did in Times Square not so long ago, but I'm going to do a massive walking path and mural here in Union Square, which opens on May 1st. Yeah. So you'll walk out into Union Square, right where the buses go, and you'll have, you know, a 400-foot long mural of mine on the floor there. So that will open there. You know, we're here at Neuhaus, June 1st here. I'm going to do one of my music performances here.
Oh, brilliant.
September, I have my museum show opening at Grounds for Sculpture, which is an incredible museum out in Trenton, New Jersey. And that's going to be a show that's going to run for 2 years, and it explores, it's called Past, Present, Future. So I'm exploring past work, bringing work back from, you know, 30 years ago, to present work, to future work. And the future work will be working like in sculpture and kind of blending the past, present, future together. So that is a show that will open in September. And aside from that, you know, there's a lot more kind of community spaces and projects that I am exploring and want to continue to explore.
Brilliant. So you're going to be in New York for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. Are you going to be traveling back and forth to the West Coast, or?
It depends. So, you know, if I have a reason to go back, yes. Yeah. But I actually want to keep my feet on the ground as much as possible. You know, I just briefly mentioned I took a 1.5 years off as kind of a travel sabbatical. And I went to Brazil for a few months. I went to London. I traveled around America. I took time off to see what's important. I think as an artist, it can be quite scary to take time off because you're like, what if people forget me? Like, what if I don't make things? Like, what if I, you know, you can get caught up with the what if. And instead of being like, let me just take a step back and reassess what my purpose is, what's important, what do I want to feel within this practice? What do I want to say within this practice? And through that time, the answer was, oh, my purpose now is to put myself in as many opportunities to be in flow and share that with others.
Is there any advice you'd give to young practitioners coming up that you'd like to, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. And it's funny, you know, we always like advice for the young people,
Yeah.
and I think there's advice for all people who are creative,
people, yeah,
and I think younger people need the least amount of advice because if you're younger, you've probably are closer to mentors or parents or teachers, or classmates. Like, you're in the closest proximity to get help and support than anyone else. And so you're almost in this ecosystem. And then once you get out of that and you're kind of, 10, 20 years along, we're a little bit more isolated. But, I think as a whole, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is that we all draw as children for a reason. Yeah. We draw to connect our head to our heart to our hand. We draw to express what's inside to the outside. We don't all need to be artists. We don't need to do that as a career, but we're given this gift of drawing, and we should use that because in today's world and society, we need as many free tools that allow us to be ourselves, that allow us to be healthy, that allow us to be our higher, most energetic selves as possible, and drawing is a tool to that. So I would say if you're younger, if you're not as young, if you're even not as younger as that, draw. Put a little notebook in your pocket when you're waiting for someone, when you've got a little bit of time, when you're on the train, just pull it out and write and draw and kind of recalibrate yourself.
Yeah. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming today. Is there anything you would like to, any kind of parting messages you'd like to give people?
I would just say, hey, like, we're in a world where it's can be very difficult, but be yourself. That's it. Just be yourself. Just take some of the facade, the protection, the whatever down, and just be open, be yourself. Because we all know that your thoughts are like a boomerang. That's something I heard this week, is what you give is what you get. Yeah. And so if we're all giving more, we're all going to get more. Yeah.
Be yourself. Everyone else is taken, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Exactly. Shantell Martin, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Never Work a Day. We'll be following your work and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Good job.
Never Work a Day is produced and created by Preview Media. Our team includes Nikki Frankel as executive producer, Stefan Vlasky and Nishal Small are our social media managers, and Jasmine Jackson is our show editor. Thank you for listening. Please take care of yourself and those around you.